Hello friends, welcome to my channel. Today I have brought this beautiful pouch batwa for you. You can use this batwa to keep makeup, ornaments and also mobile. There is sufficient space for tab as well. This is also ideal for children to keep lunchbox and water bottle, compass, etc. I have used drawstring to close and open the batwa and used crochet strip as a belt. For demonstration, I have knitted mini version of this batwa, so you will get idea how to crochet this beautiful batwa. So friends, let us start now. First we will take slip knot and then 6 chains, 3, 4, 5 and 6, and then slip stitch in first chain. So we will create small circle here, take a chain and create a puff stitch, and then take 2 chains, 1 and 2, and again puff stitch in same circle. You have to create like this 6 petals of puff stitch. Here we have completed our second row. Now we will start our third row. For that, puff stitch in first gap, and then 1 chain, again puff stitch in next gap, one chain, puff stitch in next gap, here we will take 2 chains and puff stitch in same gap to enlarge our batwa. Again 1 chain and puff stitch in next gap, now onwards we will increase 1 puff stitch on both sides of this batwa. Again 1 chain, puff stitch in next gap, one chain, puff stitch in next gap, now on the other side we will increase one more puff stitch in the same gap. Now one chain and slip stitch in first puff stitch. Here we have completed our second row. Now we will start our third row. For that, first bring yarn in the gap, and then puff stitch. One chain, again puff stitch in next gap, one chain and puff stitch in next gap. In this gap we will increase one puff stitch to enlarge the batwa size. Two chains, 1 and 2, and puff stitch in the same gap. Chain 1 and puff stitch in next gap. Again chain 1 and puff stitch in next gap. One chain, puff stitch in next gap. Chain 1 and puff stitch in next gap. Again here we will increase one puff stitch, two chains, puff stitch in the same gap. One chain, and puff stitch in next gap, chain 1, and here we will end this row. For that, 1 chain and slip stitch in first puff stitch. Here we have completed our third row. In sample piece, I will increase 7 rows and then we will stop increasing size of the batwa. Here I have increased 7 rows, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7. Now it's our 8th row. Now first we have to stop increasing and then we will decrease 2 rows to get shape of batwa. Let us start our 8th row now. Puff stitch, one chain, again puff stitch in next gap, one chain and one puff stitch in next gap. Here we will not increase any puff stitch. From here we will stop increasing size of batwa. One puff stitch, one chain and puff stitch in next gap, one chain and puff stitch in next gap. We will continue these steps till the end of the row. Again here we will decrease one puff stitch. Let us start to decrease the rows. You will see that shape of batwa has turned inside. Now we will take puff stitch, one chain, again puff stitch in the corner, without completing the stitch we will take another puff stitch in next gap. On needle we have created 2 puff stitch. Now we will close this puff stitch at a time. So here we have decrease 1 puff stitch, 1 chain, puff stitch in next gap, again 1 chain. Continue these steps till the end of the row. Decrease 1 stitch on the other side of the batua. So our shape will turn inside. After 2 rows of decreasing, our shape will look like this. Now here we want to increase corner shape, so we will get this frill shape. In corner we will increase 3 puff stitch to get this look, frill look. This is our end of the row. Take puff stitch, and 2 chains. Here we have to increase 3 puff stitch. So beginning of the row and on the decrease stitches and in the end of the row, 3 times we will increase 1 1 1 puff stitch. This is our beginning of the row. Here we will take 2 chains and 1 extra puff stitch in the same gap. One chain and puff stitch, in next stitch. Here we have reached up to next decrease. Here we will create 2 puff stitches in same gap. 2 chains, again puff stitch in the same gap. 2 chains and puff stitch in the decrease shape. Two chains, again puff stitch in the same decrease place. One chain, we have increased 2 stitches. Now puff stitch in next gap. Two chains, again puff stitch chain 1 and puff stitch in the next gap. Here we have increased 3 stitches. Similarly, we will increase 3 stitches on the other end. Puff stitch, two chains, 1 and 2, puff stitch in the same place, same gap. Again 2 chains and puff stitch in the next gap. Two chains, puff stitch in same gap. 2 chains and complete the row with the help of slip stitch in first puff stitch. Here we have completed our last row. Now we will cut the yarn . Here also we have increased 3 puff stitches, 1, 2 and 3. Our pouch is completed now. If you want, you can attach belt also. If you like my video, then please like and share. And if you are first time on my channel, then don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon to be notified of my upcoming videos. So thank you for watching my video, friends. Bye till then.